Welcome to Turning Hard Times to Good Times. I am your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm speaking to you from the borough of Queens, as I usually do, here in New York City, and it is the 15th day of November 2022. I do want to remind you that I publish a newsletter called Jay Taylor's Gold, Energy, and Tech Stocks that's focused primarily on junior mining stocks, junior exploration companies, companies that actually find and then develop real wealth, real money, if you will, gold and silver, in the ground. And so I think a very exciting time for that sector right now, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in the second segment of today's show. I do want to mention Chen Lin. What is Chen buying? What is Chen selling? You can sign up for his letter as well. Go to questions, what is Chen buying? What is Chen selling is the name of his letter. ChenPicks.com is the place to go to sign up for Chen's letter. Also, like to encourage you to send along whatever comments you have about this show to questionsfortaylor@gmail.com. Questions, the number 4, Taylor@gmail.com. And our sponsors for today's show, those that make this show economically viable: Irving Resources, Noble Resources, Gold Bull Resources, El Oro Resources, Reyna Gold Mining, and Timberline Resources. I've titled today's show, The Mechanics of Fiat Money Destruction. Alistair MacLeod and Quentin Henning are my guests today. Human beings have been capable of believing, ever since Eve ate the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, that they could be like God simply by obeying without limit their hedonistic desires. The big lie, most relevant to the topic of this week's show, is the one told by Lord Maynard Keynes in 1935 when he suggested that societies should become rich, or actually could become rich, by consuming more than they produce. To lend credence to that lie, Keynes required honest, market-driven money, gold, be replaced by fiat money, that is, money manufactured from debt. Fiat money has no intrinsic value. It is a faith-based money, and as we have just seen with the FTX cryptocurrency debacle, that is now playing out in the crypto and financial markets. When the debt upon which money is manufactured can't be repaid, that money quickly becomes worthless. Also, what Keynes didn't reveal, and politicians chose not to know, was that at some point in time, as debt outgrows the income of a national or international, on an international scale or on a national scale, the more fiscal and monetary stimulus that are created, the less positive effect they have on the growth. And then at some point in time, like now, for example, monetary and fiscal stimulus actually turns negative. So, for example, the fiscal stimulus that the Biden administration forced into the economy after Joe Biden became president was a major factor in the surge of inflation that is now more than offsetting the nominal wage gains of workers. Among institutions, the most vulnerable of all during either an inflation or a deflationary outcome are banks that have loaded up their balance sheets with enormous amounts of debt relative to their equity holdings. In the second half of today's show, I will ask Alistair MacLeod to help us understand the market dynamics that banks are now facing that guarantee their inability to continue making loans if they desire to keep their banks solvent. How then does he expect governments to respond to an economic downturn that results from a lack of lending by banks acting in their own interest, not being able to make loans? Well, the economies, especially economies like this one, that is based on credit and debt-based money, cannot survive. So how will the federal government and other governments around the world react to this impending economic debacle? Looking at long periods of history when major economic calamities take place, such as during the Great Depression and during the inflationary 1970s, major systemic changes in monetary systems are usually implemented. There are a growing number of analysts who think we are on the precipice now of a major monetary system reset. This is one of the most, if not the most, uncertain times that I can recall, uncertain in many different ways, geopolitically, monetarily, just a lot of unrest and division in our country. More than all of the 75 years of life that I've lived so far, I can't remember a time that's been more tumultuous. than this. The 60s certainly were a time when there was a great deal of difficulty in our society, but I can't recall a country that was so divided as it is now, nor can I, even in those days and in the 70s, remember an economy that was in such perilous straits as this current one is. And so, through all of this, all of these uncertainties that we are experiencing, one thing that has been as stable as anything, and that is gold. The purchasing power of gold has not changed over thousands of years. What we can say with regard to the current situation is that despite the decline in stocks and bonds this year, gold has held up reasonably well. Just before we went to the show, before we went on this show live today, I checked, and gold was down by just 2.89% so far this year. Now that compares with an S&P that has lost 16.5%. And long-dated treasuries, my goodness, they're down 30% or so. So despite very few people having any desire to own gold these days, relatively few, at least in America, gold is performing its function of preserving wealth relatively well. And so it makes sense to look for companies that produce real money, that is gold, which retains its intrinsic value for the long term and thus avoids these cataclysmic declines in wealth. When we come back from the break, world-renowned exploration geologist Dr. Quentin Henning will join me to introduce, I think 5 or 6 different exploration projects that he's really excited about. Those are in the gold and silver fields, primarily gold and silver exploration projects that he's working on or he is investing in through Crescat Capital or with Crescat Capital. So Quentin will be with us to talk about some of those. One of them are actually a sponsor to this show, but the others are not. And they're stories that I think if you're interested in investing in the exploration sector, you won't want to miss what Dr. Quentin Henning has to say.